Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Contact Lost. I am Tomek, or Tweak, and I am joined by my co-host, Joker. Hi, dude.
Hello. Hello,
How are you doing?
everyone.
How are you doing? How have you been?
Uh, I'm okay. I'm not late for a change. I've been late to these for the past couple of weeks,
Yeah, I'm
by a minute
back,
or two.
so
But
I
still,
attribute that to me being here. So maybe it'll stay like that.
yes, yes,
Right,
yes. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
right. So today, I mean, we will get back to how you have been and what you've been involved in recently in a moment. But first, I guess we owe our listeners and viewers an explanation. Uh, we did say that, or we did announce this episode as an episode where we are going to be talking about lessons learned and drawing conclusions from games. And we even invited two guests. However, you cannot really see them on the screen right now because they are not here. They just haven't joined yet. Golonka has just written to me that he is putting his child to sleep. He was hoping that the child would be asleep already, but unfortunately, he didn't manage to put his little baby to sleep. And Gyto is missing in action. So as soon as they join, they have the links, they have everything. As soon as they join, we will involve them in the discussion. Um, in the meantime, we are going to entertain you
Yep.
ourselves as we used to in the past, and I hope that this will suffice should the guys not join.
We
So
feel
yeah,
for Golonka. We know the struggle very well, both Tweak and myself. Meanwhile, Gyto has got the new Necron detachment leaked, so he's probably too busy building lists.
exactly.
It might be for the better if he doesn't join, because then we'd spend 6 hours here listening to Necron's rules and new
And him
combos,
rambling.
etc.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we'll see. Now,
right.
all kidding aside, hopefully they do join us in a moment.
Yeah, but if they don't, I think we can manage this ourselves because we have some stuff prepared to be shown on the screen and to discuss a little bit. So yeah, stay tuned because I think it's going to be interesting independently from the fact whether we have guests or not. So, but before we delve into this, Joker, what have you been involved recently? Have you been to any tournaments? Have you done any hobbying recently? What's up?
I've not done any hobbying recently, which bumps me out because I really need to finish my little Genius Tier dudes, basing them and stuff like that. Here is a dude,
Hi,
for
dude.
example.
Mm, okay.
So that's something that I should be doing, but it's really hard to just sit down and do it. Just really need to get over it and just do it.
Yeah.
Um, Apart from that, well, I've been trying to get as much TTS gaming as I possibly can, but it's not been as much as I hoped for, because obviously I want to train for the upcoming year where I'm hoping to attend a little bit more GTs than last year or this year still.
Okay.
So yeah, that's pretty much what's been going on with me. What about you? We've not heard from you for ages.
Yeah.
So what's on the radar?
I guess I guess I'm back. I guess I'm back to the hobby after almost a year. I missed it. I missed this. I missed talking to people and stuff. But also, I finally got down to actually painting, hobbying, doing something. And I am also discovering like new techniques and stuff that I have never used before in modeling. Like, have you heard that there are like special effect paints or something like that, which I was absolutely shocked to find. I bought Vallejo's frost effect, and I
Okay.
when I saw the video on YouTube how someone uses it, it looked like it was artificial, like AI did it or something like that. I couldn't believe it. But no, seriously. But then I bought it and I started using it, and I mean, it's completely random how it behaves on like bases and stuff, but it's actually kind of cool. I don't know if you will be able to see this on the screen. This is to the people, probably not, to the people who have,
Are watching.
yeah, who are watching on YouTube. Basically, this is like you put this liquid on plastic and it turns into those little crystals. So it's not perfect on camera, but it
But wait,
actually
is it
looks.
the snow or
It's like
something else
it's
you're
frost. It's
talking
not
about?
exactly snow.
Uh, yeah,
It's
fair enough.
actually called frost. So if this didn't like convince you, I don't know if the camera can catch this, but look, I was doing this today. This is a base for my Caladius tank. So I started like making a snow base because my custodies are going to be like snowy, frost-bitten kind of custodies, no golden ones. And look at this buildup of, I don't know if you can see it, buildup of crystals. This is done by a single effect, and the crystals just grow from the base when you apply it. It's like
Now,
uh
so what? You put it on a flat base, and
yeah,
that's
you
the
put it on a
effect.
flat base, and that's the effect. That's
Oh,
like you get.
that's pretty cool.
Look how tall this is from the base. Like my mind
Yeah,
was blown, and it's I, it really dries very. It takes really long to dry up.
yeah, I
So
can imagine.
I I was checking this online to verify whether I've done something wrong, and I found a post on Reddit where someone said that you can actually use a hair dryer to dry this faster, and the effect will like appear. So I went to the bathroom. I took my wife's hair dryer and started drying it, and it literally started drying up while I was looking at it, and the crystals started coming up, and it looked exactly like on the video on YouTube. So my mind was blown, and I recommend it to everyone. So if you want to get snow, apparently you can like mix it with colors and have colorful crystals and so on. So it 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 looks like frost crawling up on your windscreen or on your window or something like that. So I highly recommend it, even though the effects are a bit random. So I can never tell whether it's going to be a puddle, whether it's going to be like this sprawling tree, or whether it's going to be crystals coming out of it. I don't know what the rule is, but it's amazing. So I strongly recommend it. And I actually made progress on
Coding
other
it up.
shit as well.
Yeah,
So
we can't see it.
yeah. Sorry.
Ah,
So
there. Now we can.
yeah, so I have two of those. I have two Caladiuses. I have 12 Venatari, not painted yet, but on the way. So I have shit to do, to be perfectly honest. So yeah, I sunk deep into it. So yeah, so that's me. Um, have you? I mean, you said you were going to attend more events next year. So is that like a New Year's resolution or something like that to attend more tournaments, or are you just that hungry of competitive play?
Well, I wouldn't really call it a New Year's resolution. I haven't looked at it that way, at least. It's just that I'm hoping that the children's situation at home is stable enough for me to actually attend more events. It's simple as that. The fact that it's just that a New Year's starting as well, it's just a coincidence, really.
Mm,
Uh,
okay.
didn't exactly plan it that way.
So when you say you're going to attend, do you mean like actively play or attend to do podcast and coverage and so on,
No,
or
no,
both?
play,
Play.
mainly play.
Hmm.
Obviously, hopefully doing coverage at WTC this year, unless I make the team, which I doubt. And yeah,
But
yeah,
the ambition is there. I
that's that.
understand it.
And the ambition's always there, but
All right.
the time required to put into it, not necessarily. But yeah, you gotta be
Okay.
ambitious.
I mean, yeah, you got to be ambitious, and I think this ties in perfectly with the topic of our today's episode. We still don't have our guests, so I guess we're just going to jump into it. Uh,
Might
because
as
if they
well.
don't join, sorry,
Might as well
I think if they don't join,
jump into it.
we might want to try to fit this within an hour for an easy listen for everyone. So essentially, uh, the idea for the show today, the idea for the questions that you're going to see on the screen right now, or in a moment, came to my mind as I was discussing stuff with you, because you told me that you attended Pira and that Pira,
Me?
yeah, because you said that your performance at Pira wasn't exactly what you were hoping for, and then I started asking you questions like,
Oh,
how did it go?
it was bad. It was bad, and we've managed to do the put out review with Myson in a way that wouldn't suggest I was even there, and I was thrilled about it.
Sorry for revealing a bad reveal then, but we don't have to go into how you did, but let's just say that this inspired me to start thinking about it, because if you remember, I started asking you stuff like, did the people there discuss stuff with you? Did they give you hints? Did they help you draw conclusions, and so on and so on? And I was kind of disappointed when you said that no. So
To be fair, I wasn't really. I was a bit of a bad sport. I wasn't in the
mm,
mood,
yeah, I
so to
can
say, to
imagine myself.
discuss after.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, but we'll get to that. And a lot of the reason for this was because I had the impression of being diced. But obviously, after analyzing the games like a day or two later, I would uncover the mistakes that I did, and yeah, it would then become maybe more apparent, or just having a wrong perception of a pairing that also contributed to this, and then led to whole bits of frustration.
Mm. Yeah, I've been there many a time. I used to do that before. Actually, the whole, or one of the reasons why I disappeared for almost a year was that I got fed up with the game because, yeah, my armies weren't like top tier. Plus, I lost like 27 games in a row, and I got into this bad sort of
Hmm.
mood of. I mean, at the end of every year, I used to get like this seasonal depression, but it was like it escalated really badly last year, and changing a lot of things, changing the hobby, changing the job, changing the car, changing other stuff, it really helped. So I'm back refreshed, and let's hope that it never happens again. It's actually unbelievable how important your job satisfaction is to your like life quality and so on. I had no idea,
I
but now
think
I do.
that's actually quite believable.
Yeah, well, definitely it is. But for 4 years, I used to manage a team in my company, and I thought I was happy. But then at the end of every year, when it came to like end of year appraisal, assessing people's performance, and so on and so on, this was just draining and so on, and it drove me into those depressive states. Now I'm in a new position, nothing like that. I actually enjoy what I'm doing, and yeah, it changes your perception of everything around you. So I strongly recommend it to
Well,
everyone. If you
good for
suffer from
you.
stuff like that, then maybe it's time to change something about your current state of affairs. Anyway, you might have already figured out that this is going to be about lessons learned and drawing conclusions from your games. And how I wanted to structure it was to create a document with some questions. This is maybe not for like the most pro players, although this was the intention of inviting Gyto and Golonka to find out how they do it. But if they are not here, we can manage it ourselves. I have a document in front of me that I will share in a moment. There are questions. The questions have been formulated in such a way that you cannot simply go and answer them as yes or no. So they are supposed to be worded in such a way that you actually have to put some thinking into them, and hopefully you can, yeah, like put a little bit of strain on yourself to actually figure out what didn't go well, what went well, and so on and so on, what could have gone better. And the document is divided into three sections. This is a work in progress, but the idea is that it's divided into three sections. So the setup, the table, the preparation before the event. Then the second bit is about the flow of the game or games, and you can ask yourself those questions after every single game to check how you did. And then the third part is like post game. So again, some conclusions from the game. Did you stick to the plan and so on? We will get into that in a moment. So I hope that with Joker here, and if the guys join later with their help as well, we can review this document, we can finalize it together, and then publish it. So for your benefit as well. So if you so feel, if you feel that this could potentially help you with improving, then by all means download it, use it, take it with you to a tournament, and or after the tournament when you come back home, when you what's the expression, when you blow off some steam, you go back to the document and you reflect on how you went. So that's what we are going to be doing right now. So let me share the document. I think I should be able to bring it up on the screen right now. It's kind of small. Let's make it bigger.
Yeah, you
I
might want to
think,
zoom that in a bit. There you go.
yeah. Okay,
Maybe even a
I
little
did.
bit more.
A little bit more. Okay, that is fine. Can I hide this? Yes, I can. Wonderful. All right. So, um, let's start with the bit before the tournament. So the so-called setup or the table. I don't know if the questions that we have here are in the right order and so on. Those were just things that were coming up or well coming to my head when I was trying to think of the ideas for this document. So maybe the order could be changed or something like that. But essentially, I think they serve their purpose. So the first one that I put in was what was the mission and what was the minimal necessary effort to score. How many objectives you had to hold and so on. Joker, is that something that you find important? Is that something that you pay attention to? Is that something that you reflect upon after a game, whether you played the mission well, or are you so seasoned already that this is sort of a given and you don't give it a second thought?
I mean, yes and no. Probably towards the end of the question, more yes, because obviously if you play a lot, you're probably familiar with all the missions. If you're, especially here in Poland, where we play mainly WTC, it's almost always playing the same 7 missions from the event pack, right?
Hmm.
In random order. Sometimes things are a little bit mixed up, but well, not too often. So definitely you need to pay attention to the mission. Going to an event, you want to familiarize yourself with the event pack and know what missions might come up, because there are some odd ones that actually change the flow of a game and the potential outcome, and whether you need to approach it more aggressively or more defensively.
Hmm.
But yeah, if you just do lots and lots of games, it just, it's muscle memory, right? At some point.
Yeah.
Um,
So what they
so I
say,
hope that
reps, reps,
answers your
reps.
question.
Basic. I mean, yeah, it does. So many pro players that we have been discussing stuff with, they always say repetitions, right? So the more you play, the better you remember, the more you learn, the more you speak to your opponents. You can look how your opponents do things, and you can basically learn from them. And there are dangers in that because you can fall into certain patterns, like what Joker said. The packs in Poland, for example, are usually fixed, and you get used to certain missions. And I think we've heard people like Innis talk about like UKTC and then going to WCW, or Leshu, who went to the LGT and needed to adjust to different missions and different terrain layouts and so on. So at the end of the day, it's absolutely true. Read the mission deck, read the terrain layout, what is going to be played, and then have a think. What is the minimum required effort that you need to put in to complete a mission? Like, if you look at Take and Hold, which is I think the simplest of all the missions that you have, it just says the player whose turn it is scores 5 VP for each objective marker they control. So you don't need to spread across the entire table. If you score max 15, maybe you just need to hold 3. Does it make sense to extend and reach out to the fourth one? I'm not sure. Maybe not. Maybe 3 is enough. Maybe 2 is enough sometimes. So I guess this is what it boils down to. But then, as Joker said, there are missions that definitely change the whole setting, change how the mission is played. If you look at Supply Drop, where the objectives disappear from the table uh, in certain order, you need to account for that, and the whole placing of your army on the table will define whether you win or lose this mission. Because if you focus on the wrong side of the table and the objective disappears, you might not be able to get to the other side of the table on time or in time to secure those valuable points. Am I right with this, or am I missing anything, or any comment
Yeah, pretty
on the
much.
mission?
Just no, just to comment on this in general. Whilst it's obviously good to get the reps in, sometimes you might want to watch out for the automation, because if playing, let's say, round 3 at GT, it's getting late, and sometimes it might actually be a bad thing that you're going into it without paying too much attention. So always like
Yeah, on
just pay
autopilot.
attention, make sure what, yeah, exactly. So try to avoid that and always just make sure you know what the mission is, and that you're planning accordingly, and obviously pay attention to which round it is as well, as that also might impact how you're scoring, right? Whether you're going first or second.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, now I recall Innes said that I think UKTC doesn't play the ritual. So if you're going to an event, if you're from the UK and you're going to an event outside of the UK, just make sure that you take that card with you and you read what the mission is and how you are supposed to place those objectives, or go to TTS like we are in right now. Just, spawn the objectives, look what happens, go to the version with what is it called, hidden supplies, see how the objectives are placed, or if you're playing the ritual, look how far 12 inches is to be able to put the objectives on the table where your opponent is going to put, or potentially can put, objectives on the table, and try to account for that, try to take that into consideration, because this will define how the game goes, basically. And it's better to come to the game prepared knowing this than get caught off guard while playing the mission or playing the game. So that's that. Back to the document. So that is, I guess we covered this one. Why did I choose tactical over fixed, and wouldn't have made more sense to go fixed this one time? So, what do you think, Joker? Is this a valid question, or recently we haven't seen fixed too much?
I think it's a bit moot. I haven't seen fix too much because it's hard to come across a situation where you actually have two reliable fixed objectives. At least I haven't been playing an army that can pull that off. I'm not sure. Is Cleanse still fixed?
Might be. I
Used to
mean,
be.
let
So
me see.
if no, but it's still
Do search. No, sorry, it's not this. It's in the missions, in the mission cards. Cleanse. It's fixed. Yep, it has the symbol over
yeah.
here. It's fixed.
So like the only scenario I see this happening, if you're playing Green Tide, for example, then you might consider going Cleanse and something like bring it down, maybe engage on all fronts.
Hmm.
But that's I think a fairly rare situation. You usually most often you'd go tactical, especially that it gives you the option to discard the card to get a command point. And you should still be able to get close to the 40 points that you can score on secondaries
Hmm.
most of the time.
Yep, I included this question. So yeah, back to the question for a moment. Was the choice of tactical over fixed the right one, or maybe we should alternate or change it somehow? Um, I I included this here, one, because soon we will see the new balanced data slate, so it's not impossible that they are going to change fixed again so that they are a more viable choice. Because yeah, after the complaints before the previous data slate, I guess fixed just well, they became obsolete due to the uproar and the dissatisfaction with playing fixed over and over and over. And the second reason is, even after the balanced data slate, I played, I think in the Tryhard League or in one other TTS league, um, and I played against an amazing guy whose name escapes my mind now, but who was playing Grey Knights. And he was playing a very non-standard list in which he included um, a lot of characters. He had the Khalid's assassin. He had deep striking characters, basically. And to my shock and surprise, and later awe, it turned out that he went fixed. So he was deep striking characters every single game. He had this character, again, whose name I can't remember, that stands up if you kill him. So he was basically able to secure behind enemy lines. And then there was extend battle lines, or something else, the one that allows you to score more if you do it in your opponent's deployment zone. And he went fixed.
Locus,
Locus.
Alfomers.
There you go. There you go. So he chose that, and we were playing on Dawn of War deployment. So my deployment zone was, very stretched, and I had to stretch very thin to be able to cover the whole, which I decided not to do because I felt like this isn't going to help me much. And eventually, I think the game ended with a draw. But
Mm.
I was, yeah, to be perfectly honest, when I first saw what he was trying to do, I thought, bad choice. It's going to be an easy game. But then those characters turned out to be very formidable. Khalid's assassin that I couldn't target from afar with my tanks or any other shooting, or my shooting was just ineffective with custodies. So yeah, it caught me off guard. So that's why I included this question here as well, because that might happen to you or you eventually.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I was referring to, but a different example of it, right? You have
Yeah.
the list that can do this coming up against a list that you can do it against, and the right scenario, right? Because Dawn of War
Exactly.
is for something like Custodes that doesn't have a lot of units.
Hmm.
It just allowed him to do exactly that, right?
Yep. Correct. All right, I think we can move on. So, question number three, when we discuss the setup or how the table is prepared, what was the deployment and how have you avoided spreading too thin? And now, Joker, has it ever happened to you that you messed up your deployment, basically?
Oh, I'm pretty sure this is a regular mistake of mine. I'm rarely confident in my deployment, so I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer this question. However, what I
Hmm.
can always recommend is, yeah, do exactly what you're doing. So boot up TTS, try it out, see how your army fits on the table in the deployment zone. Try different maybe scenarios, maybe put another army across yours to see what it can do, how it can move round one, and what it can see in your deployment zone, and even take pictures with you to the event. I've done that before, so just set it up on TTS, take a screenshot, pull it up during the event, and just do the same thing. But
Yep.
again, uh, don't turn your brain off when you're doing that, right? So always account some things that might be different from what you expect in your opponent's army. Maybe some other enhancement that gives us count move or whatever. So just make sure you don't get caught off guard whilst doing your automated memory stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, um, and again, the question was just to remind it, whoever is listening, what was the deployment and how have you avoided spreading too thin? So one thing that I noticed that I do from time to time is I try to spread evenly across like my entire deployment zone. One unit is going to go to that objective, one is going to go to that objective, one is going to go to the leftmost objective or whatever. And then it turns out my opponent, you know, if they have the opportunity or play one of the armies where you can do the Appy Downy or something like that, they change the tactic completely. They move to one side of the table to focus just on the three objectives that will grant them the win. And my units have to run across the entire table to get to them. Again, usually that means I got outplayed because as I play Custodes, they are pretty slow. Getting to the other side of the table can take 3 turns or more, especially if they don't give you like charging targets. So yeah, it might be a pain if you spread too thin. I loaded here Folger's list from the WCW because obviously seeing Custodes winning something, I created the list or recreated the list to give it a spin. And I just needed the models really to demonstrate something. So again, I'm gonna put some stuff on the table, but I'll also take less used list from WTC because everyone probably knows that list, and there's a Calidus assassin over there. So one thing to think, and this is to the newer players because I'm sure the pros already know this, but if you are a newer player, you're learning the game, and you don't want to start the game on a back foot, make sure that you take units that can do the missions early. This maybe isn't like a complicated deployment to actually be able to complete the mission, but if we change the setting for a moment to say search and destroy, um, and you get a mission like containment or a mission like um, engage on all fronts in the first round, it might actually turn out to be quite complex if you focus on starting here and running towards your opponent, depending of course what army you're using. But if you get containment, which you need to do being in these areas. So here and here. To people who don't see the screen, I'm just drawing on the map showing where containment can be done. So if you don't have units that can start like you know a unit here that can move up out of the deployment zone into the section where you can actually score the mission, and you don't have a unit that you can hide so that it can complete the mission if the mission is like sabotage or whatever completes in your opponent's turn, then yeah, you're losing points in a way that you shouldn't be, especially with containment that can easily score you 6 points just because you placed the models in the right place and nothing else at the beginning of the game. So if you mess this up, the rest will probably go tits up as well. So have that in mind. Have a think about how to deploy your armies, whether your army fits into the entire deployment zone, and so on. Because with some tables, it might get complicated. Can your units? And this is me at the LGT last year, where I was playing in the Invitational, and I had this wonderful idea of taking Death Guard with 2 Land Raiders. Fantastic idea. I love Land Raiders. I love Death Guard, but the tables are definitely not designed to play 2 Land Raiders. And I was playing against Innis with 3 Ballistus Dreadnoughts that essentially took the Land Raiders apart before they even left the deployment zone. And it was a bad idea because there was only one path that I could use to leave my deployment zone. And on another table that was there, I was in the open. I couldn't hide them. So again, have a think, read the terrain layouts before, or look at the terrain layouts before you go into the event, and plan and build your army accordingly so you don't get caught off guard by that.
Yeah. I'd reiterate that point that you made regarding the missions. So exactly, make sure you can do stuff like containment turn 1, because that's valuable 6 victory points. But also, actually, we'll get to that later probably.
Mm,
Um, yeah.
yeah,
So
and
let's
remember,
move on.
remember also. I mean, this is probably obvious to anyone who is listening, but again, when I came back after almost a year of break, it caught me by surprise because that's not how I remember the game. When you discard at the end of the round for SCP, you can discard both cards, which, again, I know, and I've been doing that for the last 3 or 4 months since I've been back. But the first games I played, I had no idea. So if you didn't know, now you know. You're welcome.
Yeah,
Uh,
we'll get to to the missions later. But
yeah,
always, you need to always regarding deployments though, you always need to have some sort of a overall plan on how you going to approach the game, how you're going to win it, and your deployment needs to be compatible with that plan, right? So you always need to remember how can you reach your expansion objective, how can you secure it, how can you maybe delay your opponent scoring their expansion objective, etc., or deny them during the course of the game. So make sure you adjust the positioning of your units to be able to fulfill those
yeah.
roles targets.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, when you blow off the steam after the tournament on a Monday, sit down and think, does my army complete the missions easily? Do I have units that can hold the objective for a turn? Do I have units who can sit in a ruin for a turn and withstand stand the barrage of, I don't know, no lost weapons? I know they are not that prevalent right now unless you play versus sisters, but still, like I have a unit of 4 sisters of silence, and in the last game that we played with Joker against his GSC, a single Achilles, whatever the buggy is called,
Yep,
just
that's the
just
name.
ki- just killed 4 of them in one round of shooting. A single one. So effectively denying me whatever the mission they were doing. So again, think whether you have units that are resilient enough, or maybe lone ops or anything like that, or maybe if you didn't take them, are there alternatives to what you have taken to actually be able to do that? Um, Joker, anything else from like the setup or the table, or are we done and quick? Can we move over to the flow of the game?
I think we can move on.
Okay.
Yeah, people listening, if you want to weigh in on what we're doing, let us know in the chat.
Yep. Uh, I just saw the comment from Lewis getting GSC done just in time for
Yeah, I
massive
put it
nerfs.
on screen earlier.
Ah, sorry, I missed it. So, but do you think that there are going to be nerfs for GSC, or is it too early to
Well,
expect good stuff?
apparently there's a code ambush rework in the work, and I'm actually looking forward to it, whatever it's going to be, because that rule is it's horrible. It's horrible. Besides not being very thematic, I think, for the army, although I think I know what it's trying to represent. It's just so random, and you don't want that much randomness trying to play competitively.
Yeah,
And also, there's the factor that if you roll hot on it, it just gives you an obnoxious feels bad, uh, even if you're winning, because it's like you've got 4,000 points against your opponent's 2,000, and that's not exactly a satisfactory win if you achieve it. And on the other hand, you've got the cost of that baked into your units, and if you're not rolling the resurrections, then you're a bit screwed, right? And a
yeah,
bit on the back foot. Then you're feeling like you're playing 1,500 points against your opponent's 2,000.
yeah,
So whatever they do with it, I hope they do something with it, and whatever it is, I'm happy to see what it is,
yeah.
basically.
Actually, looking forward to that as well. Although playing against you and playing against both kind of the most potent detachment has been eye-opening, but I do agree that it's random for me and it's random for you. Like the last game we played, it could have gone either way. It went the way it went because I don't know, 80%
Yeah,
of
I've,
your
I've
unit
had a
came
lot
back
of
wrong.
reses at Pyra. I've had little reses. It was as if I was resing on sixes. And that's also one of the things I mentioned when I said I felt diced, and it really clouds your perception of the game. And
Yeah,
that's also something that the why I don't want that rule to stay as it is.
yeah. So I guess we can take what you said and treat it as a takeaway or a lessons learned as well. In that, um, have you eliminated? And this might be the next question to add into the file, into the document that we're editing right now. Have you eliminated unnecessary randomness from your list? And with GSC, obviously, this is impossible to do because you roll for every unit that dies. But I don't know. There are armies like orcs, which for fluff reasons and so on, have a lot of randomness in their shooting, like on characters and so on. But are they the most competitive characters to take? And stuff like that. I can't come up with any other example right now, but I don't know
Oh,
if you
there
have.
are there
Mhm.
are at least two tanks that have a casino gun in
There
the
you go.
game and are quite common. But yeah, they actually appear in almost every list. Well, it's hard to build a Votan list without Sagittars
Hmm.
because there isn't really any other transport apart from the Land Fortress, but it's not exactly a one-to-one comparison. And you've got Vindicators
Yeah.
in both Space Marines and Chaos Space Marines. Whilst in Space Marines, they're not picked as often because you've got a variety of other tanks to choose from that can fulfill the same role. But for Chaos Space Marines, that's just a solid platform with good damage output, but it can also disappoint you at
Hmm.
relevant moments of the game.
Yeah. So have you eliminated randomness from your list? I'm just going to put it down here, and we can go back to other questions. So we're moving from the setup and the table to the first question about the flow of the game. And again, those questions are random, so maybe they could have been that they could be rearranged. We will work on this. But first one, and this is excuse me, again something that from time to time happens to me. It happened to me when I picked the game back up, and I picked up Tau. So essentially a shooting army that has very little combat, which is absolute something that I wanted. Like this was my own decision to try a new playstyle. Again, as I said, I changed a lot of things. I wanted to change the playstyle as well. Um, and I found the same difficulties with Tau that I used to have in the past with the Tyranids. With the Tyranids, I had three lone ops in my army, so two Neurolictors and the Death Leaper. And on one hand, they give you such a great advantage and table control, but on the other hand, it's so easy to overextend with them and to lose them unnecessarily, which happened to me many a time, that I thought that maybe putting this question in here makes sense because I noticed that when playing Tau, my Shadow Sun would also sometimes die unnecessarily in stupid situations or like in scenarios that I didn't predict, and yeah, it was a bummer. So has it ever happened to you? Like GSC also have lone ups. Is that a
Oh,
challenge for you?
constantly. Yes. I
Okay,
mean,
yeah.
I've almost always, if not always, misplayed the Reductus Saboteur. Because this weird combination of having both infiltrate and well, maybe it's not weird, both infiltrate and lone op makes me want to put her forward to secure an objective early on, and then she often dies. Also, to use her ability of the immortal wounds. So yeah, I've not been the best at that. I'm a little unsure on the phrasing of this question. Like, how did you manage your characters? I mean, characters. Uh, I don't know how to say this. Well, without fixed assassinate being as popular now, it's not as important to play them carefully. Because there are a variety of character units that play a variety of roles, right? There are some like the Tau commanders. You want to play them aggressively from time to time to be able to use their actual damage output, right? And there are other characters that have more of a supporting role, like or a different role entirely. Like you don't want to mismanage and give away for free your Great Knight's Librarian
Hmm.
because it's a consistent source of damage that is annoying to your opponent to be able to counter it in a good way because it's got an okay defensive profile, so not necessarily dying to Overwatch. It's a one model unit that you can easily fit in as anywhere that you need, especially with a 3-inch deep strike strat. And yeah, he just does solid damage with his Vortex of Doom, right?
Hmm.
So you don't want to lose that unnecessarily. Also, you don't want to lose lone ups unnecessarily because obviously they've got uh, they're a utility that allows you to safely score objectives, right, from time to time, especially when you're against a shooting army. They're a boon that not all the factions actually have, so you don't want to give them away for free. The tape measure is your best friend, and you need to utilize it. Make sure that no one actually gets within those 12 inches to shoot them, or up close to charge them, where the lone up ability doesn't matter as
Yeah.
such.
Yeah, so you said that you're not sure if the formulation of the question is the best one. I'll explain what I meant and why does it say how did you manage your characters? By manage characters, I mean have you used their abilities to the full potential, but also have you actually stopped yourself from using their abilities when it's not necessary. And what I mean by that is, again, I play Custodes. Custodes like to bring Kyria, Kyria Draxus, who has this great ability of making the unit that she's attached to and herself a lone up within 18 inches. This is great, but it can sometimes backfire. And it did backfire in, I think, even in our last game, where if you roll a one on that ability, because it works on the two, if you roll a one, she like inflicts mortal wounds on herself. And it happened in one game that I killed her with that. So it's definitely something that you want to be careful about. Maybe I'm just a special one, and maybe it doesn't happen to anyone else. But I can imagine there are characters that can do damage or that the abilities of which can backfire. So think twice if it makes sense to use that ability, especially that the case that I'm talking about was more to train muscle memory than anything else, and I actually didn't leave the ruin with with the unit when she inflicted the damage on herself, and I didn't make her alone up. She suffered 3 mortal wounds, was left on one, or something like that. So yeah, that's one thing. The other example is, which I, again, when I picked up Custodes, a thing that I kept constantly kept forgetting was to do the Appy Downy with Calidus at the end of my opponent's turn. Like, I try to monitor and analyze the cards that my opponent has left, and I knew that my opponent, or just that my cards within my deck, I still have behind enemy lines left, but I simply forgot to pick up Calidus at the end of my opponent's turn. And guess what? Behind enemy lines appeared in the next draw. There was place in my opponent's deployment to actually drop her, but I couldn't because she was left on the table. So that's what I mean by like managing characters. When you include them in the list, you probably do it for a specific purpose. Make sure that you play them to that specific purpose and that you don't abuse the abilities, especially the ones that could do some harm to you. So that's what I meant.
Yeah, okay, fair. Yeah, now it makes more sense. So apologies for that. Yeah, that's a good example. But also, you could have been doing the exact opposite. So just always picking up that Calidus when sometimes it would be more beneficial to keep her on the table
That is true.
to reach some place that you wouldn't be able dropping 9 away
Hmm.
from the opponent. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but and this model in particular, all the models where they have the auras to increase the cost of stratagems. Um, it takes a bit of practice to learn how to use them properly and how to position them. So again, reps, reps, reps. Look at how you position them, whether like after the games, have a think. Have I overextended? Have I gone too far with them? Have I left an opening for my opponent to actually maybe ignore the big baddie of the list, but actually go for that um, technical piece, or that piece that plays a specific role in my army? Because once they eliminate Calidus, the door is open to use the all the stratagems and so on. And I find Space Marines, my anathema with their dreadnoughts, or Dark Angels with Lion and so on, making AOC more expensive on while playing Custodes. Jesus Christ, that's so important. So losing and giving up Khalid is, by positioning her too much up front and not behind the ranks of like wardens or something, can cost you dearly. So yeah, that's what I meant with the question. Let's jump to another one. So it says, for newer players, list that, and again, this comes from me. This is what I deal with. But so I would be curious to hear, Joker, if you suffer from that as well. List the distractors during the game that took away your attention from the game itself. Stuff like forgetting your gear, basically, so your tape measure, or you haven't used the clock before, or your opponent's behavior, like your opponent, I don't know, sings or does some weird shit during the game. And I have examples for that,
That
which I think.
that Okay, no, that's not the one I was thinking about. I
Okay.
think I know what you're referring to, but that reminds me of some random post on the internet about some guy apparently playing World Eaters and shadow boxing during their opponent's movement phase, doing push-ups and shit like that. You haven't
Okay.
seen it? Okay.
No, I haven't heard about it, but
You
that's
need to
interesting.
Google that.
All right, I
Yeah,
will.
so apparently he was shadow boxing and shouting during the game. Very interesting.
That's crazy. Well, yeah, but for example, I had a game many years ago. There was this guy in our community that I really had a tough time to bear and play against, just because he had those little quirks and behaviors that normally they wouldn't bother me that much, but he usually did them when he was winning against me at the tournament, and this is what agitated me a lot, because at the time, and as I said, this was many years ago. At the time, it felt like he was teasing me, like he was doing it on purpose. I don't think, after all those years, I don't think it was actually teasing. It was just as I said, quirks and stuff or parts of his personality that he did, and today they wouldn't bother me at all. But back then, I know that I really got annoyed by that. And yeah, Gyto is typing to me. Give me a sec. I'll just tell him to join because it's not too late.
No. Yeah, I've been
Give
doing.
me a
I
sec.
did the same thing. So he's on his way.
All right. So stuff like that. So I know that I have problems with focusing if something is like if I last time I went to a tournament, I brought my Venatari that were not glued to their bases. They were on blue tack or some yeah stuff like that, and they kept on falling over like all the time. They were not fixed to the bases and they would fall over, and I needed to put them back on the base. And this really I don't know. It's just distracted me, and I couldn't focus on the tactics or whatever because the models were falling apart. Um, also, uh, yeah, if you play borrowed minis or if you play 5 games at a tournament and you are not used to standing up that much, and your legs start hurting or your back starts hurting or you needed something to drink or stuff like that. So, have you ever had any of those things that you know affected your game?
Yeah, I've had a number of these, and it feels like I don't know. You're reading my mind writing this. I mean, I've got a prop here. I don't know if the camera will catch it, but this is
Give me a
basically
sec.
like 7 different Gene Stealer hands sticking together through the magnets inside.
Oh, okay.
So where I'm going with this is I'm magnetizing pretty much everything I can because I'm a cheap fuck. Uh, and yeah, but it's very much a double-edged sword. So when you're magnetizing stuff so small like Gene Steer coats or Elda, yeah, you grab something by the arm and it falls off, right? And it happens constantly. It can get into your head, and then you can also get yeah, I also often play with borrowed minis, so obviously I'm even more afraid to touch them, move them around, or put them aside anywhere so they don't get broken. And I've recently played an RTT where I had borrowed magnetized minis, and the magnets were even smaller for Gene Steer coats than the ones I used. So they constantly kept losing arms all over the table, and it was
Hmm.
like, oh no, I'm gonna have to buy the whole army back for the person I borrowed it from. So yeah, that can stress you out. I mean, for getting tape measure, you can always just borrow it from your opponent. I don't see any issue with that. A clock is something that used to intimidate me as well. I've made the mistake of not practicing it before it came up. There was an event that I did go to a GT, and suddenly someone goes, "All right, let's play the clock, right?" So it did agitate me a little bit, but yeah, that's something that I wholeheartedly recommend. Just try it out with a mate beforehand. Play a casual game, but set the clock up and stick to it. And you get used to it in no time. I mean, now it's just great. It also helps you actually manage your time better because you have the awareness of how much time you actually have. So you don't think as long.
Hmm.
That's helpful. And obviously, all the need to drink, eat, you can just do that on your opponent's time. Shouldn't be an issue. I mean, nowadays I think the people just play fair. So I
Yep.
usually just see the first turn of my opponent. If do I need to watch the measurements? No. Okay. See ya. I'm off to the toilet, to the water station, water fountain, whatever, and it's fine. Right? You need to sit down from time to time, or bring a mat like Jay from Mohawk does. So you can counter all of these things, but if they might be an issue for you, just need to think about them. And also, one thing that isn't listed here, the noise and the lighting, although that I
The
think is more
stimuli.
rare. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That can also distract you if you're prone to it. So
Yep.
watch out for that. Maybe and yeah, just bring countermeasures if you have to. Like ensure that when there's a break between games, you go somewhere aside and just chill out for a bit if that's what you need. But if this applies to you, you probably know better than myself what to do with it. But just remember about it and factor it in, and make sure you prepare for it. That's all.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I just thought of another thing to put on or into this question. Like, I have a family, like most of us probably. I have a child, I have a wife, and I often catch myself forgetting to call my wife while at a tournament, like during the breaks and so on. And then I have this bad feeling that, oh shit, no, you know, I wouldn't like to call, I wouldn't like her to call during the game. Next time, I'm going to call during the break on or something like that. So, I mean, maybe you don't have that problem. Maybe some of you do. Call your wife when the time is right. I see we
I,
have
I mean,
Gyto.
if you're bringing that hammer into this, I've definitely also had moments where I felt guilty going to an event. So yeah, that can also distract you, right? But
Exactly.
yeah,
Right.
let's not open that can.
Yeah, it's a
Maybe.
huge it's a wormhole. Um, all right, everyone. We have Gyto joining us. So hi, Gyto.
Hi everyone. Yeah, let's just pretend that I'm in a different time zone and this is a misunderstanding, not that I completely forgot about the whole thing. Sorry guys.
No worries, no worries. Like we handled it so far, but it's good to have you nonetheless.
Yeah.
So a little bit of an introduction. If you are listening or watching, sorry, listening to this or watching this, and you haven't heard the name or the nickname Gita, then where have you been? But uh, in all honesty, Gito is a seasoned Team Poland player who has won the World Team Championships last year, came in third this year as part of the team who represented Poland. We have done some master classes on Necrons with Gito that were available or are still available on our Patreon. Uh, because
No,
Gito
don't
is
don't use the trigger word today. Don't say Necron.
Yeah, it's a bad time to say Necrons.
I mean, oh, yeah, we when you were away, we covered that already.
That's
The
fine. That's
data
fine.
state is coming, and yeah, we are not going to delve into or we will try not to delve into Necrons today. But yeah, we thought that it's a good idea to bring Gita into this one because I remember the times when Gita wasn't part of the Team Poland when he was practicing and learning the game and so on and so on. And definitely there were a lot of conclusions and a lot of lessons learned drawn from those games. So Gito, maybe let's start with this one. Let's get into you becoming the Polish representative or the member of Team Poland. Was that an easy feat? Was that easy to do? Did it take a lot of conclusions and lessons learned to get to that level?
Yeah, it's achieving something like that, going to the World Team Championships and so on. It's never easy, uh, and it took a lot of conclusions, a lot of times. Like if you want to get good at something, at some point you need to fail, and yeah, I failed a lot. That's my way to get good. If someone knows me a little bit more, I'm the, let's say, the most known of for grinding in 40k, and I think that's the way I'm get better, to grind a lot and draw conclusions from the games I had. Because if I don't see something or I didn't have opportunity to get a feel of something that can happen on the table, uh, I cannot really like work in my mind only. But it's extremely important to understand what happened in a game, if you lose, if you won, and so on, uh, to get a feel for it, and then to understand what was the reason I won, what was the reason I lost, how I can improve, and that happens on so many different levels. And one thing that helped me, I think, a lot was talking to Typhus when I was starting to, let's say, become a competitive player, and having his point of view on strategy, on tactics, on the approach to the game, and overall how you can build like a frame of reference in your head and and how to like organize different moving parts.
Hmm.
So uh, I would point out that during that time I had a lot of very good teachers, let's say, that I could talk to and improve because of that. So there was Typhus, there was Duda, there was Vladi. I play a lot of games when I was starting to
Hmm.
get really good against like the legends of Polish community, let's
Creme de
say.
la creme, yeah.
Yeah, like you couldn't get anyone better, really. Like
Hmm.
at some point when I stopped being a random guy to Skark, I also started to talk to Skark. So there is a lot of to gain from talking to experienced players and learning how to analyze this game.
Hmm.
And I think the huge part of my success was I have a lot of material to analyze because I played a lot and I have opportunity to talk to great guys that understand the game and like learn different approaches, really, because not everyone not everyone approaches the, let's say, post game analysis the same way.
Hmm.
And learning like different way things was like great and really allowed me to be where I am now.
So this is actually amazing and great that you said this, because like, oh, that it can be a grind to learn, that you need to do those repetitions, that you are not born with dice in your hand and so on. Because to be perfectly honest, if you I don't know if it's just me, Joker, Gita, maybe you can comment on this, but I listen to a lot of podcasts, especially the foreign ones. And from time to time, when you listen to the people over there like David Gaylord, or I don't know, Nas, or you hear the MVSL, you feel like they were actually born with dice in their teeth or something like that. Like they were born ready to play this game. And like Liam, as far as I know, he can just approach at the table with you know any army and do well. I can't do that. It's impossible for me. I need to grind. I need to play and repeat and learn on my mistakes. Usually lose and learn from that. This is the longer way probably, but this is how it works for me. So I think it's extremely comforting to hear from a pro player, but it's also your way of getting there. So thanks for that. Thanks for bringing this up. Mm, Now, since you weren't here, we already started going through the document.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially we covered the bits about, like, preparation for the game, understanding what the missions are, understanding what the table is, the layout, the terrain, and so on and so on. We are now delving into the flow of the game, so maybe we can pick up where we left with Joker when you joined. We just discussed the topic of distractors during the game, so things that essentially can get you on the wrong footing, like forgetting the stuff that you're attached to, so your markers, your tape measure, or any other gear that you might have, or I don't know, uh, even stuff like bio,
Yeah.
uh, not going
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
toilet or something like that. So have you had any such difficulties ever?
Well, I have all the time. I'm the most, let's say, if I didn't have a coach on the WTC, I would probably get lost mid first game every time. And if someone knows me a little bit, I'm, let's say, if there's something to work on in 40k and in life in general, is me being more organized and remembering times and remember, like, there is a podcast with cool guys to talk about, like, there's a lot of stuff. So I'm not a pro on this front, so
I
good that it's
did
already
remind you,
covered.
by the way.
I know you did. Like, you can call me middle of the night, you can call me. That works better, right? Because something's raining, I then.
I will remember.
Yeah, I'm very sorry again, but on
No
this
worries.
topic, I would say, from my experience, I don't have a way to focus and so on. So I'm just a mess in regards to those distractors and other things. But I see other people do stuff that help them up. I see Pumba listen music in between games. I see some people having like a small toy that they play with during the game and so on. So there are some things that other people have different approaches. I'm just a mess on the table, and I have like a coach that point me directions and
Mm.
do stuff for me. And then they just Team Poland, when I was the last 3 years when I was in WTC, just basically bring a person uh, at the start of each game, just put me against my opponent, show me the opponent, and I would just played. So yeah, I'm not a pro on that.
Mm.
Yeah,
Uh,
guys, if you ever end up playing against Gyto, just ask him about Necron lore on his time, and you'll win because he will clock out.
Yeah,
yep,
that's true.
that's how you do it. So I actually had another thought about like distractors and so on. And mm I think it's also a good thing to, or a good conclusion to draw, to build resilience against things that distract you that depend on other people. So, like the things that we have mentioned in this question, so forgetting tape measure, models falling apart, this is on you. This is the part that essentially is dependent on you. But there are things that your opponent can do. I mentioned like an opponent singing or something like that. I had this one situation where at a tournament, my opponent would play his round and then he would say stuff like, "Put the clock on me. I trust you. Do your stuff. I'm going to have a cigarette." And this happened every turn. So like I used to smoke in the past. I don't remember smoking that much, but okay, fine. But to be honest, it distracted me so much because I didn't feel comfortable moving my models when he was away, just because I'm like that. And also, uh, again, the clock, the management of the clock. Do I keep it on him or do I switch to, stuff like that. So when I say build resilience, just learn to be assertive because we're at the tournament. He doesn't have to smoke that much. Or we're at the tournament. He doesn't have to drink another beer or, whatever is there that spoils the game for you. I know it's difficult, but be ready to talk openly about it and maybe ask your opponent not to. It's sometimes that easy. Might sound difficult, but it's actually that easy. Can you like not go, please? I'll go outside with you when we're done, but let's or stuff like that. So I don't know. Maybe it's again my own example. Something definitely that happened to me. We don't have to delve into it much longer. Let's move to the next one. Um, Again, Gito, I just explained that the questions that we have in here are built in such a way that they are supposed to elicit an answer. They are not just a yes or no question. They are supposed to be formulated in such a way that they actually have to make you think. So the next one
Hmm.
is list the moments when you thought you could use a token or a marker of some sort. And by that I mean, like to demonstrate like counting wounds or that something is battle shocked or something like that. Have you had a situation or situations where this was important or game making or breaking, or is this again just me talking out of my ass?
Um, Sometimes you get into situations when you have too many dice and you can't get into unneeded conflict with your opponent if you don't keep those things clean.
Hmm.
Um, 90% of the time, or like 95% of the time, obviously there's not a problem because as we discussed on previous podcasts, and I hear you guys talk about this a little bit, the gentleman play overall is getting much better and so on. So most of the time people will just like say, yeah, sure, that's the how many wounds you have. But just to keep it clean for me and my opponent, I would say using a wound counters is just a good practice, just to have it for yourself, for your opponent, so you always, and it's a small thing, but you can agree with your opponent how you count the wounds, because even if your opponent don't have the wound counter, you can count remaining wounds, you can count wounds dealt, and so on, just to have it like clear. So before every game, uh, there is like a small ritual I do with my
Hmm.
opponent, which is uh, touching on maybe more questions, but it's also answering this one is, do you reroll cocked dice, like small cocked, like you have a cocked
Or how
dice on
you define
objective?
cocked, right?
Yeah, how you define cocked, and do we reroll? Do we keep it? Uh, how we count wounds? So do we use dice? Do we use counters? Do you deal the do you count the dealt damage or remaining wounds, so you have like a clear picture? And then I ask to play with my opponent's dice, just because when you when you play me, and I have a tendency known abroad also to eat banana and roll well. I feel stupid when I roll really well my own dice. So I very much so like to use my opponent dice just to don't feel uh, that there's something working in the dice when I roll well. And also you avoid the problem of even accidentally dice being uh, cheating dice, let's say, like the dice that are rolling better than they should or worse than they should, right?
Yeah, you're washing the blame from yourself
Yeah,
essentially that way.
exactly.
Yep.
It's your dice, mate.
Yeah,
Maybe you
yeah.
should
Like
protect them.
I love, and also at start when I was doing that, I was like, oh, sorry, guy, I roll too much sixes. I have sustained. I'm sorry. Now I just play with it. Like if I use my opponent dice, and I played too many games, saw too many rolls, to be like, oh, that's like sorry for rolling well. I'm now just like all in on trolling. Like my Locust Destroyers hitting 24 times in Overwatch and just deleting units of letters. Great pun, right? You shouldn't get your dice red because they're thirsty for blood. Sorry, mate.
No, but it all boils down at the end of the day. It all boils down to intent, and it all boils down to essentially agreeing with your opponent at the beginning of the game how you want to play that game. Like at work, if you approach a project, you want to discuss with the project team how you're going to approach it and what the methodology of your work is going to be. Here it's the same, although it sounds too professional maybe, but it is what it is. You just want to talk stuff out, ask the necessary questions. Once the models are on the table, you know, this is again a question to ask yourself after the game. Have I pre-measured stuff? Have I measured my opponent's distances and stuff like that? Have I seen the unseen, so to say? It's easy on TTS. Again, if you are not a TTS user but you are looking at YouTube right now, we have a table. You can just, I'll take my tank. Where are my tanks? I'll take my tank. I'll put it on the table. If I stick my tank out here, what is the range? What can he see? Where can he see? And so on. So
Turn
do
those
that.
lines off
Oh yeah, sorry.
because it's a bit
It's confusing.
hard to read. Yeah.
Yeah, and I cannot start game, so I cannot get rid of the deployments. But essentially, yeah, like ask your opponent what the
It's good now.
ranges on of the stuff are. What can you see? Walk around the table. Have you, like, ask yourself the question: have I walked around the table enough? Because it is sometimes extremely important to just see your opponent's perspective and see what he can see. Very often, I assume that my opponent cannot see, and then it turns out that he can, or the other way around. I assume that I cannot see or cannot be seen, but my opponent can see me from his vantage point. So stuff to take into account as well. I'll put it in the file, but I guess we can move on because I
Yeah,
have
but
to.
this is something that you really need to refer to playing by intent, right? I mean, you agree that, look, if I stay here, you can't see me, right? And then if your opponent's doing the movement and turns out that he can see you, then you readjust your model because you've agreed on that, right? That I'm in this position.
Yeah, but playing by intent is sounds easy, but there are tools to use during playing by intent. Let's say there are ways to get it better.
Yeah,
So,
100%.
for example, when I measure stuff like angles, how much my opponent can move. Like, let's say I want to avoid tank commander shooting at my lich guard. So I measure how much the tank commander can move. I put a dice there. Then I take a measuring tape, make a line with measuring tape, and use the second measuring tape to, let's say, move the models. So I have like a exact angle when how much I can move to not get exposed. And when I'm doing that, I also communicating to my opponent, hey, can you check your movement, the movement, because I'm doing the whole thing to hide from this angle. So, or like make a line between two ruins that nothing can shoot at you unless they cross this line, and ask your opponent, can something cross this line? It's very important not to just say, oh, I want to hide here, or I want to not get shot by this, but it's also actually this, like making sure this position, this play uh, is possible, and communicating with your opponent all the time during that, like doing that. So I always ask my opponent to, he see me doing that, and I ask him if he can double check if that's true, and I can, like, he can do the measurements again. Or I even ask my opponent very often to, can you see, like, show me how far you can move with this tank if you roll a 6, and
Hmm.
what's the angle.
Yeah,
Just ask your opponent to do that,
yeah. I wish
because
Yeah,
it was possible to
100%. I
just
mean,
copy and paste a unit and just move it around the table.
yeah,
That
yeah,
would be perfect.
yes, that's
yeah, it's
that's
so
on
easy to
TTS,
get.
but you exactly do the same on the normal table. And when you're drawing lines here, so if you roll a line after
Hmm.
the movement, you just use a measuring tape to do the same in the real life.
Yeah,
And exactly,
Yeah,
and
you just do it like this.
if only
so
I could copy models in real life, I'd
I
have
mean,
Yeah,
all the
I mean,
armies.
that's what I thought as well. But now I remember that Duda, for example, he brings empty bases, and
yeah.
he actually puts them on the table to show where the model, where the where the movement will end. That the base will stand here. From here, I can see sorry, not this one. Uh, I can see to there, or stuff like that. So that's an amazing thing, and maybe this is something worth considering as
Mhm.
well. If you have some spare bases at home, just bring them with you. um
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah, it's super helpful if you're playing
it's
knights, for example.
yeah. I
exactly.
wanted to mention that it's very cool to have it when you're playing knights. It's very cool if you play a deep strikey army. So if you have the 6 dread knights, or you have hypercrypt with the heavy destroyers that you want to 3-inch deep strike, so on, to have those models, those bases, for you and for your opponent to use. So for example, I'm bad at names and I forgot the name, but this year when I play against Team USA, Tyranids player, he had like a base of Trigon, so to use for both of us. But he basically said, hey, use this, when I was measuring 3-inch deep strikes. So you have a tool for you, both you and your opponent, to have the game play fair and make it
Hmm.
easier for both of you. So you don't have any, like, it's basically the game can get as chill and as easy to play if you prepared, or your opponent from the other side prepares, to have the game to be easier, like to get to play the game with not making it harder for yourself to play it by intent, but make it easier to play it by intent. And like there are tools, as you mentioned, uh, spare bases, asking your opponent to do the measurements, how much they can move, and
Yeah,
or
actually
check. Yeah.
understanding your opponent's perception of the table is something that is often forgotten. But like how, even then, sometimes it's even down to like understanding the basic rules. Can you see through this, or is this ruin see through, or can you see through this floor, is this model high enough to see, stuff like that. And then I'm trying to find this now, but it might take a wee bit, so I'll forego
Um,
it probably. Yeah, go on, Joker. I'm just looking at
yeah,
something.
maybe it's a point that you can quickly add to the first section. What are the terrain pieces being used? Now that you refer to, seeing or being seen through terrain, etc.
Yeah, and there are some key units with, let's say, different heights that you can take in consideration during that. So, for example, if you play like a tank commander or other tank, I always ask my opponent, even though I usually know how it should be, but I ask my opponent, is this rhino sticking out or is it this castigator sticking out above the ruin? Can you shoot through the small windows and so on? So
Mm.
no matter what's the actual model, to have it agreed to play it one way or the other, right? So for example, I ask every now I play a little bit guard. I ask every opponent, uh, can they how their shooting vehicles or monsters can see through the windows and so on, which part of the model can see or can they see at all through the
Mhm.
small ruin when they are inside. And I show my tank commanders that they can see on the smaller side of the ruin, they shouldn't see on the higher side of the ruin, and just show them. And I gonna play in such a way that, okay, from this side you can see, from this not, do you
Mhm.
agree? If they say, well, they should have like a small antenna being a little bit higher, said fine. It's just to have it, let's say, communicated both ways beforehand. So it comes down really to the simple thing that if you have something to communicate to your opponent before it happens, it's just better. So yeah.
Yeah, we also mentioned, and I found what I wanted to show you. So a thing, I don't know if it falls under distractions or maybe like a question that you can ask yourself after the tournament is, am I using all the necessary tools? And what I mean by that is, and I will die on this hill or defending this hill.
I
Uh,
knew you were going to bring this up.
I
I
because
just
I
knew it.
loved it. It was I was my mind was blown when this was happening. And to anyone who is not seeing what I'm showing on the screen right now, it is basically a recap of War Games Live's coverage from the London GT from last year, where Olivier Weiss from Team France, the national team of France, was playing. I can't remember whom, but essentially, y- go back and watch this what I am showing on the screen right now, because it was like a master class in itself in what you should do, how you should play it, how you should play by intent, but also how to effectively use tools to your advantage. And by tools, I mean on the screen right now you can see he had like 50 little plastic measures to show where the deployment starts, where it ends, where the models can drop, where is 9 inches away, where is this, where is that. And he effectively used this throughout the entire game, through all the games that were streamed. Um, it was just, I'm trying to find like another spot. Look, just if you're looking at the screen, look at that. This is like his stack of measures that he brought, and all of them were in use at some point, put on the table. And this was just immensely helpful to him. It was immensely helpful to his opponent. They knew exactly what was going on, what can appear on the table in which spot, in which place, etc. I strongly recommend that you firstly go and watch this, and secondly equip yourself with tools like this, because you cannot have too many tokens and you cannot have too many tape measures, I guess. So
Well, unless it's starting to distract you from the actual game.
obviously you could go overboard, right? But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I hope that every person watching this has this self-limiting element in them.
Yeah,
I hope.
yeah, I agree. All those static measures and so on is like important, and I use them myself quite a bit. Until I lost them, and then I get the new ones, and then I lost them again. But that's just me.
Yeah, but again, it's different stroke for different blokes, I guess. So
Yeah, yeah.
if you are this kind of personality that likes everything ordered and so on, then definitely this is something for you. If you are used to playing on TTS because everything is orderly, fixed, and doesn't move, and you find it a distracting factor that you go to a tournament and people nudge the ruins, they push the table a little bit, stuff moves around, and so on and so on, all those measures, tokens, and so on help bring this order back to the table, because it can happen that you come to the table and stuff is in disorder. and you need to rearrange it, and you need to remeasure it, and you waste time. The round has started already, and instead of talking through your list with your opponent, you actually need to reset the table. That's a great distraction for me, for example. So if you have the measures, if you have the layouts with you, if you have, I don't know, tabletop battles on your phone that shows you what the table actually should look like, or there is even this app now that shows you in almost like VR setting how the or where the terrain should be on the table if you just like open a camera. Bring that, because that can greatly simplify everything for you.
Yeah, I actually used this app once. Like I didn't have it, but the friend of mine that I play against have it, and it's actually really, really helpful to just quick fix the table with this overlay
Exactly.
VR. Let's say it's actually really good and works well.
And if you're like a TO and you have the possibility to have mats with those lines that show deployment zones and so on, Jesus Christ, that is mind blowing. That is so helpful. You can see where the center of the table is. You don't have to pre-measure it. You don't have to allocate the dice to it. If you can do it, do it. But that's for a different talk, for a different video, probably. Moving on with the questions that we have on the list. So we discussed intent, pre-measuring. Um, Name a thing that you and your opponent did differently, like marking wounds. I think we covered that as well. So confusion and eliminating confusion essentially can help a lot. This one, how much time was left on the clock at the end of the game, and what was your impression about the pace of the game? What could you have done faster or slower? Gyto, I think this is a question for you specifically because years ago when you were preparing for the national team, I remember that was a challenge for you.
Yes, so even though today I'm sometimes get tight on the clock, and for me the answer is do the important stuff as precise as you can. And it's like there are moments in the game when you can be, let's say, more more focused and spend more time doing stuff, and there are moments in the game when you just need to skip stuff. So overall it pays to be just coherent, do things one by one. So first you get your turn, you do all the planning first. You when you measure stuff, you put dices in places
Hmm.
to remember. So for example, when you do your plan, you when you measure, oh, my opponent can charge this far, it's not only measure it once and move models so they avoid it. I usually first make a like whole turn plan. So I put dices in places that, okay, my opponent can move this much, he can shoot me on this angle. First, let's say I check the state of the board that can happen in my opponent's turn. So I check the charge ranges, I show myself what's the angles that he can move on. So first you build how your opponent can respond, and then you formulate build up plan, let's say,
Hmm.
uh, based on that and based on cards and stuff that you need to do. And by leaving dices in good places, or like plastic measuring stuff that Oliver uses or Crooker uses a lot, like just some measuring tools to have them done, to have them like placed beforehand, it helps very much. So when you making your plan afterwards and thinking, okay, I could do this, I need to change something, you don't need to measure it again. You already have it pre-measured when stuff can happen. You don't do everything, obviously, because that's wasting time, but you take the important units, take the most important units of yours, and like, let's say, prepare the ground for them to move
Yeah.
around.
After a while, you just learn what is important, what isn't,
Yeah,
and and you
exactly. And
also observe your opponent, what your opponent does, or your opponents during different rounds of the event, and learn from them, because probably at some
exactly.
point you
And
will meet a more skilled one than you are.
yeah, and just important thing to leave a mark for those things, basically what I would
Hmm.
say. So you when you need to revise plan because of something, you have it. No, you don't need to measure again. That's the
Yeah.
first thing. The other thing is uh, just focus there are some things you can do. You need to do very precise. There are some things you can do a little bit sloppy. So to understand what can be done more precise, what can be done more sloppy, and doing that also include as much of intent as you can. So I always talk a lot to my opponent about what I'm intending to do.
Hmm.
So even if you measure it a slight amount wrong, then you can correct it based on
Yeah,
intent, right? If
absolutely.
Yeah, that's so
obviously,
important.
obviously, it can sound that your intent is to win the game. It's not true. That's why you make measurements when it's very important and so on. But there are some things like screening your backline, let's say, and you roll the dice for advance to try to screen your backline, and you show your opponent how much you can move. So I can move from this guardsman model, let's say 10 inches, and you take the 10 inches, show him 10 inches. He sees that is more than you need, and then you quickly make a screen on your backline. So
Hmm.
he's seen that you can move more than enough. You do the screen, and then during his turn, if there's a little space and you intended to close it, like he can get like, I don't know, 125 mil base,
Yeah, you
and
can
you
go
could
like, we
easily
discussed
take,
this, right?
yeah, we discussed this, I show you,
Yeah.
they shouldn't be a problem, right?
Hmm.
And it's important just to communicate to your opponent all those things.
Yep.
So that's one thing you can like get the time, let's say, uh, save time. Other thing is, in some points in the game, if it's not really a solution that I use, because you shouldn't ever do that, but it's a fix during the game. Sometimes you don't need to do certain things. For example, if you have your 10-man units of guardsmen just going on an objective to take it from your opponent, and you have 25 minutes on your clock, and it's more useful to use this 25 minutes on your clock to think about moves, not to roll 10 last guns against Land Raider. So there are things you can just skip. At
Yeah,
some point, I don't say you open playing like this, but during the game, sometimes
or
it's
closer to the end
just,
of the game, you just know
yeah,
what things matter, which
yeah,
don't. Mm.
exactly. So you can, if you make mistakes beforehand, you can get a solution during the game to, let's say, save a little bit of time and don't do something. It can bite you in the ass afterwards, because you maybe don't kill the Land Raider by one wound,
Mm.
and that's on you because you are already on the wrong time, let's say, on the not
Hmm.
too much
Yeah,
time. But it's something you take and just say, well, happens, and you need to live with it. But overall, I would say organize, make a plan, execute the plan.
yeah. And
There's
if you
yeah,
leave dice on the table, don't pick them up because I catch myself all the time marking stuff out, and then when I need dice to roll, I pick my markers and I just roll them. So don't do that. That's a stupid mistake. It will bite you in the ass.
Yeah, maybe you
yeah,
have to use something different. You
yeah.
need to you tweak. You
I tried.
clearly need to get those 9-inch tape
Exactly.
measures.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's another thing
Clearly,
on my buying list or on my wish
So,
that's
list.
so
your
for
birth.
example,
That's
for
your
me,
birthday gift sorted.
for me is I either use like the 3-inch measuring stuff, or because I'm playing with my opponent dice, I have some dice of my own and I use them only to pre-measure.
Yeah,
So I
I
don't
try
use
to do
them.
that as well. But in the thick of the fighting, I usually
Yeah.
reach out for whatever is the nearest one. And if that's a marker, my brain just doesn't compute
Too
it. I
bad.
just
Yeah,
pick
yeah.
whatever. Um, Conscious of time. I mean, I think we got the message across with this one. Joker, you go with the next one. So, which were the missions that you had to discard early because you did not have the resources to complete them? Was it due to bad positioning or lack of units to perform missions, or not talking about things like assassination, bring it down, turn one? Have you ever been in a situation where you didn't account for the mission? Do you discard missions tactically? How do you approach that?
I mean, I think we kind of started covering that in deployment. So yeah,
Mm,
that's one thing to watch out for, right? What missions you might get turn one, and just ensuring that the easy ones to score you can score. But sometimes, even if a mission is easy, it might not be rewarding enough to actually score it. Like, I think a very good example is getting a turn 1 established locus, where you're pretty much throwing a unit away for 2 VP. Do you have that unit that you can throw away, essentially, for only 2 VP? Maybe a command point is actually a better deal out of this.
Hmm.
So that's something that you definitely need to factor in when playing. So there are some missions that maybe even if you can score more points out of them, maybe you need that command point later on. So you might have to ditch it. Or maybe there's a mission that you draw, you theoretically can do it, but it requires overcommitting. Yeah, so again, I'm kind of repeating myself now.
Mhm.
Uh,
But I
I
guess,
have a
yeah, go on, Gyto.
so I have a take on this. In my recent game, I literally played 2 days ago. I have a situation when I could do cleanse with Sheras against Renegade Knights. So I could get a guy in range of objective easily. I could do the cleanse, and he probably shouldn't die this turn. But that doesn't mean that's automatically a good play, because the state of the board was if I put him there, he can have some of his knights charge him and get closer to me. So there is like a lot of things to consider. So as you said, there's do you need more CP than you need victory points? What's the board state? Because sometimes you don't want your opponent to, let's say, activate half of his army because you make
Hmm.
a movement and now he can like slingshot into you because you done some card. And very often some units are more important, let's say, than the others. So even if it the points wise the unit is not that expensive, good example is 3 Tomb Blades. Even though this unit is not that point wise expensive, it's 75 points, you usually don't want to
Give them up.
turn one give them up to score like 2 more victory points, when later during the game they can get some better cards secondary, like bigger secondary done, or deny your opponent primary because that's 6 OC that moves like 18 plus d6 inches.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of things to consider when you
Absolutely.
talk about the missions and so on, right? The position on the table. The other thing is the risk of the secondary, the very much so prevalent secondaries that you discard when you get them. Usually, recover assets and sabotage because it's just risky to give your opponent a chance to do something. So, for me, unless I know 100% that my opponent cannot disrupt it, I
Hmm.
just throw them away to get a CP. Or if my opponent if he wants to stop me doing that, he need to like sacrifice a huge amount of resources.
Yeah.
So that's fine. But like usually when you get those two, it's very, very risky to just keep them. And if your opponent has like a way and there will be some dice rolls involved, and him doing that don't put him in a huge disadvantage. Like he don't need to sacrifice his big knight into you, killing like I don't know 10 guardsmen, let's say.
Hmm.
If he stop you by doing that and then he dies in return, that's fine. But if he can do it safely, you just uh, don't allow your opponent to block your hand, because blocking your hand is
The worst thing
way
ever.
worse. Yeah, it's just
yeah.
extremely bad in this
Yep.
edition. So those two I would watch for.
Yeah, that's a good thing you've mentioned. So also don't be afraid to discard cards, whether it's at the beginning of the turn for a CP. If you get 2 bad draws, just most probably a good choice is to get rid of them if you can
Hmm.
afford it, of course. And sometimes, yeah, if you have a sabotage on your hand, that might be something to discard at the end of turn, even if you think you can comfortably do it. Always think about it twice. If I
Mhm.
keep this card, will I definitely be able to score it next turn? And does it give me enough points to be worthwhile? So
Yep.
sometimes you think a card might be easy, you didn't score it in this turn, you think you will definitely score it in the next turn, but that might not actually happen,
Yep.
right? Like you have Assassinate and then your opponent just moves his character away behind, into a position that you just cannot reach, for example,
Yeah,
Yeah.
right?
or bring
And you're
it
stuck
down
with
or
it.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Overall, keeping cards on your hand is very risky because that's allow your opponent, unless the board state is solved, let's say,
Hmm.
like during first 3 turns, keeping a card on your hand, it's quite risky, and because it gives your opponent the agency to counterplay it. Like
Totally.
you
yeah,
give tool, you give the third secondary to your opponent basically by keeping something on hand. Like you play against, I don't know, Renegade Knights lists, and you have bring it down, you cannot score it. Do you keep it? Do you discard it for SCP? Well, let's say turn one you cannot do it, but then your opponent can adjust his plan. So you need it basically two things: keeping sabotage and recover assets, or keeping any card really on your hand. It's very very risky, and you need to think about it very thoroughly if you want to do
Hmm.
it. I would just get a CP most of the time. If there's like, I don't know, area denial, let's say, and I probably can do it next turn. But what if my opponent puts like half of his army on the middle?
Hmm.
Blocking your hand can be really bad, because when you keep, let's say, this area deny and you get a second secondary that is very bad and you cannot do it, then you lock your hand even harder, because you can obviously one CP at the start of your turn discard the area denial, but the other bad one you cannot do anything about. So this is a huge risk to keep cards unless you almost 100% sure you can do them, right?
Yep.
yeah.
And
At
it
which
also,
point
yeah,
you get one card less throughout the game, or maybe more, and you
Yeah, it
might
can
miss out on
snowball.
one of those high-scoring ones, right? Like a
Yeah.
containment or whatever.
yep. But I think it sort of also applies to the primary mission. So, like, you don't always have to score a secondary mission. I guess, especially at the early stage of the game in the first turn, you don't have to jump on the objectives. You can actually dedicate time to stage to prepare yourself for that go turn in turn two or turn three. You don't have to do everything in the first turn. The game lasts for 5 turns. Sometimes it's easy to forget, and you can overextend in the first turn, and then it will bite you in the ass because your opponent will take advantage of it, even though that he didn't or she didn't plan it. Because maybe they just wanted to play conservatively and sit in their deployment and just score the bare minimum. But you opened up too much, and now you gave them agency again to decide whether they want to stick to their plan or attack you because you are in the open. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
100%. But it can also be the exact opposite, right? So sometimes it might be worthwhile to come up with more units than you'd originally think that you should do and take up objectives, because the opponent might not have the resources or be in a position to just deal with all of it, and you have the chance to pressure him or her,
With target saturation,
and
yeah.
Yeah.
and therefore secure primary points for yourself. You've added a question that I want to ask you, that one. So how much effort do you put into CP management, and was there ever a moment where you regretted using it earlier?
Who are you asking?
You.
Me.
Yeah.
You know the answer. Why are you asking this? Whenever we play, I get tempted to use Overwatch. Every single game, Overwatch is the bane of my CP, because I feel, especially when I play Town, I felt that I have a shooting army. I have an army that should excel at Overwatch. I guess I picked this army up 2 editions too late, because 2 editions ago Overwatch was way more deadly, unless you're playing Thousand Suns. But yeah, usually it doesn't pay off. I don't get my value back. The CP is lost and wasted. I do very little or no damage. But the temptation is always there. Even now when I play Custodes, uh, if I play like a Telemon that has 24 shots, statistically, those are some wounds. And then I have this romantic idea that with my Telemon I do devastating wounds. There is a chance, a slim one, but still a chance that I could do some devastating wounds in Overwatch. I'll do it. And then no sixes. None. Null. Nada. So yeah, that's the thing. Other than that, I try to plan for the future. but this is definitely something that I still am working on. So, work in progress for me. How about you, Gito? Is that something that you have now nailed and comes to you easily, or do you sometimes catch yourself yearning, thirsty for more CP?
Yeah, I'm I just a human, so I make mistakes, and sometimes I spend CP on super stupid stuff or stuff that don't give me that much value. Overall, I would say it's safe and okay to save some CP during first turns. Even if you, so for example, you guys mentioned the position when you get two battle draws in like first turns. If it happens in first turn and the matchup you play is very CP heavy because something, like you need to use something against your opponent a lot. For example, you play guard against Thousand Sons when you want to use a lot of -1 damage on your tanks and you want to use a lot of smoke. Maybe smoke is a bad example, but -1 damage and better AP a
Hmm.
lot. And then you have like sometimes it's just good if you're in position that you don't want to expose yourself too much to just let some CP just to generate some CP in advance. So when you need them, you have a little bit of a pile of CP. Obviously, later during the game, you want to use them more, let's say, freely, just to don't end the game with some CP. So at some point you use CPU for everything. And I would also say that it's true for scoring secondaries. So every game is some kind of a riddle, let's say, and during the game you have two things you're doing: you making the position and like board state better, and you making yourself victory points. And that's not the same thing, really. Sometimes you can get your board state better and don't score points during the opening turns of the game. So, for example, you don't go on the objective to get like 2 more points from clans, but you save your resources and you send this unit further to position it for the next turns and so on. So, basically, there are two things you're doing, as I said: the board state and the victory points. And during the early game, and that's also CP. So during the early game, you more of pushing on, usually more of you focus more on board state and having CP, and later on you focus more on getting victory points and spending CP as much as you can, right? The
Hmm.
later the game goes, then you do it
Yeah.
more. So that's something to consider. And that's how you play, let's say, the game that is kind of the both sides have a similar power level and they have similar chance to win. Let's say that how you should probably approach it. And that's how you approach most of the games that you want to win. The opposite for the victory points is a little bit reversed. If you defending the score and try to just survive a little bit and get some scores, so you don't get 0-20, but you get like 5 points. So usually it's you prioritize board state early, victory points late, unless you know you're gonna get smacked in like 2 turns. Then obviously do the opposite to try to get any points. But overall, I would say, yeah, you
Mm.
just go
Yeah, I
with
Agreed.
mean,
that.
because there are armies or situations where you just one stage at the beginning of the game, gather your CP, and then on the go turn you really need them.
Yeah,
So you can't be wasting them on silliness, essentially.
yeah.
Point taken. Um, right. Let's move on to the last section of the document because this is soon going to turn into a 2 hour one. So Joker, this one is for you, and I think we can put those first two questions into one. Uh, did you stick to your overall plan strategy? Why do you think was it or was it not possible? And then maybe did you stick to your plan too much or did you play on autopilot? Like, it happens to me that I have my guard that have a stratagem in Shield Host that I can make an objective sticky. I sometimes am so tempted to use that CP or that stratagem that I do it, and then at the end of the round, the unit is still on, on the objective. So it made no sense to make it sticky that turn, but SCP is already spent. So I sometimes stick to the plan too much. Does it happen to you as well?
Yeah, definitely, all the time. But well, you need to have a good plan in place, but also be able to adapt if necessary, right? Because well, you don't necessarily always, you're not necessarily always the person who's dictating the tempo
Mhm.
of the game. You probably should be, but that doesn't always happen because of many reasons. And then in that case, you should adapt, right? If you had a go turn and it didn't go as planned, you then need to try recover, right, as much as you can, to not give the game away, because that can happen. You bounce off. So that's one of those situations. And in that moment, you don't just keep pushing, right? Because you get flat out 0-20.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, do I stick to my overall plan strategy? Well, not always. I think that putting together a good plan strategy is a bit more of an issue that just comes from not having enough reps most of the time.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then sometimes maybe it's too late to switch the plan for the game. So yeah,
Yeah.
you need to watch out for that. Always try to think a turn in advance, at least. So not just focusing on what you're doing in this turn, but also taking into account what the state of the board will look like in the next turn, how you can influence it.
Basically, it's like chess, but with more pieces or more complicated pieces and rules around them. But if I go here, how can my opponent react? Do they have reactive move, or will they come closer, beat me up? Do I have cover? Do I need to be in cover? Can they see me? If I charge and kill this unit and I move, I pile in or consolidate, where do I end up? Am I visible? Am I not visible? Stuff like that. So have a plan for your opponent's next turn at least, if not yours.
Yeah, so on that point, I would say there are some hard points you need to keep in every game, like win condition, lose condition. Let's say there are some things you can work around. So if your lose condition, for example, is you're gonna get tagged by Black Templar, like your opponent win condition is he's gonna tag you with his brick of Black Templar and roll 3 up so you don't fall back and your whole guard army cannot shoot him. That's the hard point you need to always remember. And whenever you do, you have it back in your head to that my plan is to this cannot happen. So obviously you do whatever you can to avoid it, and there are some things that need to happen for you to win. So for example, you pre-positioned, you deployed, or whatever you did, that you have like a turn in advance, a unit you can send in waves on your opponent objective and take it and deny it, or maybe you play a collapse army. Your win condition is like just killing your opponent in one go, because if you trade, he's gonna out trade you. So there
Hmm.
are some hard things to understand before the game, and it basically comes from experience or someone else's experience on the matchup and so on. So there are some hard things you need to do in the game, and that there are like basically win conditions, lose conditions for you and your opponent, and just have them always in back of your head. And then there are things that happen during the game that are cool for you to happen. So for example, if you have a chance, you always should try to kill a tank commander outside of his 24-inch range, or kill it with a grenade, or kill it with tank shot or something else. So
Some
there are
more
some,
tools. Hmm.
yeah, some soft things you can do in every game against your opponent to, let's say, help you a little bit, but they shouldn't always happen. And there are some hard rules, hard points you need to definitely do to win because something, right? So I don't know, you always avoid Angron charging in something that if it dies, you're dead, basically. So if you, I don't know, play knights and you have like two knights near each other, can Agron charge them this turn and kill them both or some silly like that, right? So you always should have some things you need to avoid and understand what the things you need to avoid by everything you can, and some things that are cool things to do. And obviously, after your plan, let's say after you crosses one of the win conditions or lose conditions, what happened next if something goes wrong, right? So obviously then you play on fly, but you shouldn't really allow this situation to happen. Your strategy beforehand should uh, really take care of that. So you shouldn't get tagged and have this no retreat happen to you. But if
Yeah.
it happens, what do you do then?
All right. We'll just move on because again, I don't want to keep people on their toes for too long, and I think we can uh, bring the next 3 or 4 questions into one. Joker, again, I'll start with you. So this is essentially about the vulnerabilities of your opponent's army, and did you exploit them? Vulnerabilities of your own army, have you spotted them? And then, how can you capitalize on your opponent's weaknesses? And do your units bring value back? Like, how many games do you have to play to be able to tell this unit doesn't like work for me, or it doesn't bring me the points that I would like? Is that unit a vulnerability?
I think that depends on the unit in question, right? And the entire composition of your list. Sometimes weaknesses are visible after the first game. Regardless of what you're up against, you come to the conclusion, okay, well, this unit doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Mhm.
Even though on paper it might make sense to you because of some rules on the data sheet, the profile, whatever. But you, essentially, and then there's the other factor that I think will come up more often in singles events than in teams, where you're trying to build an take all commerce list, but you need to make compromises, right? You won't be able to cover the entirety of the meta, so you're going to just let go of some units that would be good in certain matchups because the faction that they would be good against maybe isn't that popular, for
Mhm.
example, right? So then if you come across that faction that you didn't really account for, you just thought, okay, whatever, it is what it is. How do you utilize that unit? What do you do with it, right? Or in the other way around, how do you capitalize on your opponent having a unit that is essentially not that useful against you,
Mhm.
right? So how can you like exploit that suboptimal choice is something you need to ask yourself at that point. Um, Now, repaying their value in points, that's some units are hard to actually judge on this
Or
because they
measure, yeah.
don't
Mhm.
necessarily, yeah, they don't necessarily kill that much because that's the easiest way to do it, right? Did I trade well with that unit? Did my
Yeah, did I kill
75
150
point
points with? Yeah, 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 yeah.
Exactly. Did my 70 point Acolyte unit kill 140 points worth of the opponent? So that would mean it uptraded. But it's not always that, right? There are some force multipliers that you can't measure in that manner. So some buffing characters or whatever. Or mission units, right? You
Mhm.
might have a unit of 3 Tomb Blades that Gyto mentioned that cost 75 points, but they've actually scored you 18 VP and secondaries across the game. So did they repay their value in points? Hell yes, they did at that
Mhm.
point, right? So that's something you need to account for when building a list. What purpose does it serve? What are its profiles good against? What are its profiles weak against? What are its weaknesses? And yeah, can you mitigate them, or do you have to just agree that you're going to have to take them on the
Yeah.
chest?
There's
Mm.
the other side of the coin as well in this, because sometimes, and I catch myself doing this again. Maybe it doesn't apply to the two of you or the listener at large, but I tend to sometimes bring units that I have a master plan in my brain for, and then I want to execute the plan so much that I overprotect the unit and it actually stays in my deployment zone. For example, like a unit of, I don't know, guard with Kyria. I want them to jump out in the right moment, preferably be on the objective because then they get the full wound reroll. And I wait for that perfect moment, and suddenly it's turn 4. The unit is still in the deployment. The perfect moment maybe is now, but it's already way too late. That unit should have been, 20 inches further. Um, but I overprotected it because I was afraid of losing it. So that's a vulnerability as well, although from a different perspective.
Yeah, I wouldn't look in the point efficiency in any, like, there are units that are just too expensive, and that's, you need to realize that. But overall, I wouldn't look at the unit's value about how much points they can score or how much damage they can put out only. I would more use them as tools or things your list can do, because s- sometimes it's more important to have a, for example, infiltrate that can block your So I can give an example, or we don't go to examples now.
I mean, you can
Yeah.
do it,
So,
for example. Yeah.
so for example, if you build your guard list, five ratlings cost 60 points, and usually they don't deal that much damage. They don't do that much secondaries, but they are that tool that blocks your opponent from scouting, infiltrating half of his army, and just locking you in your deployment. So there, I would more look it into different units as tools, not necessarily as pieces that for X amount of points give you X result. Like, for example, you want certain amount of units to push on objectives, and obviously you try to choose and select the ones that are the cheapest. And there is a point when having something that you want to enlist, for example, like pushing your opponent 12 inches aura that they cannot deep strike, is like, you really want this in your list. It's a huge thing to have, but you skip it because of the points. Obviously that also happens, but overall I would say it's more important to look at the list. I have certain tools that give me certain plays, and don't really look into points that much. Just look overall how much of the stuff you can fit in. So sometimes you take things that are not necessarily uh, cheap, or they will not repay you in points, victory points, or damage, but give you block your opponent from having some win condition or give you win condition. So I would more of look into this, that your opponent have his toys, you have your toys. Each of these toys is a different tool. You just want to have the right tools to answer, let's say, the overall meta, and the point differences in between them don't matter that much. I wouldn't look at them individually, but I would look at as a whole of the list. You, if you take some more expensive stuff, you will have less tools, obviously. But sometimes you take things that are not cost efficient or damage efficient, but they give you an edge into something. And a good example of that is, for example, Necron destroyers with the little guns. On paper, they are one of the best units in the game at killing light infantry, but if your list already does it good, and the meta overall don't have much of the light infantry, even though your army have the best answer to it, you
Does
skip
it make
this
sense?
unit. Yeah,
Hmm.
you skip this unit even though it's very efficient at what it does, because you need different tool in those games. So you pick something else instead of them,
Yeah.
or you,
Consider
yeah,
consider the meta that you're or the
yeah,
setting that you're in.
yeah,
Right.
and the list as a whole, basically.
Agreed. Okay, listen, guys. We've been doing this for 2 hours now, and I think this is already making our listeners a little bit wary. Plus, it's midnight here in Poland, so
Hmm.
we could be doing this for the next 2 hours, but we will never be able to account for all the possible scenarios and situations, unfortunately. But I do hope that people have their own experience and they know how to draw conclusions, but that this document can also be of help. With that in mind, the document will be linked in the description of this video if you want to go back to it. So if you want to see all the questions, the ones that were there when we started this, the ones that we added as well, I might pop in some others for you to just reflect upon. But yeah, it will be in the description. And if you feel like anything after reading this document, if you feel that anything is missing, that you have a question that you ask yourself after every single game that you believe would be beneficial for others to be placed in this document, drop a comment under the video. Let us know. I will definitely include it in the document for the sheer benefit of all the other people who might be using it. Joker, any final words? Anything that I've forgotten?
Yes, if you like what we do, please like, subscribe the video. Make sure you follow us on across all social media platforms. We've got your Facebook, your Instagrams, your TikToks, whatever. Consider becoming a Patreon, maybe, or a YouTube member to help keep the show running. And last but not least, a massive thank you to our Patreons already, and our sponsors, the Army Painter and Weyland-Yutani. With that, I think now, after blabbering on for over 2 hours, we will bid you a goodbye.
Thank you, Gyto, by the way. Thank you for showing up.
Yeah,
And
thank
for
you
your
for the
valuable comment.
invitation.
We need to repeat this, so expect another one soon.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone. Have a good one. Hope you enjoyed it. And we see each other next week on Thursday at 10 p.m. Polish time, which is 9 p.m. UK time. Bye,
Which
everyone.
is just, never mind.
Bye.
Bye.
Let's leave it.
Yeah, bye.